All right. So we're back. You joined earlier. We're back. We're having technical issues. This is what happens when you are bringing people together across the globe. So thank you for your patience. Just to reiterate, I'm Amanda Bender, CEO and founder of Kilo. And at Kilo, we are helping men become experts in their mental health in order for them to live their best lives. And today we're talking with men about their feelings. So first, we're talking with Matt Help a little bit more about his story and his mental health journey. And then we'll have a panel of three wonderful humans who I love very much. Tate Fletcher, Terrence Davey, and Josh Hunt talking more about their feelings as well. And then we'll wrap it up. We'll talk about a call to action for a follow-up event we have at the end. And then we'll send everyone on their ways and wish you all the best. So I'm going to start with Matt. Matt and I were connected by a friend I met during this time last year. George, if you're out there, shout out to you. Thank you for connecting me to Matt. And so Matt and I are going to chat a little more about his mental health journey. Hi, Matt. So good to see you.
Hey, Bender. How are you doing?
You know, I do this thing with the Kilo team where we say like something we're grateful for and our color. I think you and I might have done this in the past. So let's just start there because I think it's a really great way to like introduce ourselves to like where we are in the present moment. So what are you grateful for and what's your color today from green, yellow, or red?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I feel a lot of gratitude to be able to be here with you and all of these other amazing guys and having the opportunity to talk about feelings, something that we as men historically have not been allowed to. Usually you can have one of two feelings, either angry or happy. There's no other emotion on the color wheel. So I'm really, really grateful to be able to talk with everyone and share my story. On a scale like the red, yellow, green exercise that you're talking about, today I am green. And I think I feel very centered and rooted. Yesterday was kind of a disaster. I gave a talk and first talk went well, second talk, technical issues. So that's where I'm at. Would love to hear how you're doing.
Yeah, I'm grateful for you and for the connection that George made and the friendship that we've developed over the last few months and the feedback and encouragement you've given to me just as we've gone on this journey with Kilo. And I'm yellow. I'm feeling excited, but also a little tired, but being very present. So let's dive in because I think what you've shared with me in the past is really important for other men to hear. And I know you've shared this story a few times in the past. So I want to actually start with, before you share your story, when you were growing up and when you were a young man, what was your perception of mental health? Like, what did feelings mean to you? How did you express them? How did you learn about them?
Yeah. So growing up, anything dealing with mental health, there was a huge stigma around it. It was pretty common to call people crazy. That neighbor, they're crazy, instead of really identifying what was going on with them. My own particular family, there were a lot of substance abuse issues, which I didn't know. Like, to me, it was just like, yeah, everyone, all the adults drank. It wasn't until I entered into adulthood that I saw that they were self-medicating because they themselves had mental health issues. But it was just something that wasn't discussed. It was better to mask it, medicate, self-medicate, and then just try to deal with the conditions that existed. I was very fortunate that my mother was someone who understood the role of feelings and being able to talk about them. So from my parents got divorced when I was 5. From that point on, she'd always say, Matt, what do you feel? How do you feel? So I learned to be able to express my feelings, but it was in a safe space. I didn't feel like I could express my feelings in the open to others.
Yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of men experience from the conversations I've been having, even if like you could really share them outwardly with other people in a simple and easy way, where you felt comfortable. Um, so yeah, will you tell us a little bit more about your journey? Like, I know you were quite stressed and kind of led to some burnout, and then it got worse.
Yeah, there's kind of two different stories here. The first one is childhood, which was filled with anxiety. At the time, I didn't know it was anxiety. I was just identified as a shy kid. But there was a lot of social anxiety. When I'd be out around people, I didn't feel comfortable talking. I didn't feel comfortable being around other kids. I preferred the, you know, the being around adults. I felt like I could speak their language, and I really didn't
Mm-hmm.
understand other kids. That led to bullying. That led to me getting really anxious in middle school. Came out of my shell a little bit in high school. And then when college hit, and this is a typical story for a lot of people who experience mental health issues, there's this pivotal time between 20 and 25
Mm-hmm.
where things can start to go south pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So anxiety grew for me. Another thing that had shown up in adolescence, but really amplified when I started to become an adult, was obsessive-compulsive disorder. Um, and then all of this exploded when I decided to try to get over my fear of heights by going skydiving. And when I did that very first jump, I had a panic attack in the air.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened after that was it led to a series of panic attacks over almost 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
which also increased my OCD, and then culminated with me very last day of my 26th year on this planet, checking myself into a mental hospital because I just couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's wild sometimes is that people don't know what's going on with the people around them because we're not talking about it. And
Yeah.
so, were you able to share with the people that were around you what was going on? And if you did, how were they supportive? No.
Not a word. And that's what I think shocked so many people is the day that I checked myself into a mental hospital, I came to work, I sat down at my desk.
Mm-hmm.
The night before, I was hearing voices. I was hearing two men have a conversation in my living room. There were some things that led up to that. Like I was on the wrong I went to see my doctor, wasn't a psychiatrist. He put me on the wrong medication. I took myself off, and then I went into this spiral. It took about a week, but then,
Mm-hmm.
and I showed up at work and I couldn't take it. I stood up and I looked at my boss and I said, I need to leave right now or I'm going to hurt somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So they had zero idea that up until that moment that anything was wrong with me. I was starting to self-medicate. I wasn't drinking at work, but I would go home and the very first thing I did when I got home from work was have a drink. And so when I came back to work after my hospitalization, I actually had somebody come up to me and said, if this can happen to you, it can happen to any of us. I thought you were the most put together person in this office.
Yeah, I remember you said that. It was like, wow, super eye-opening for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think back, if I had the opportunity to say, I think something's wrong, and instead of mask it for 2 years, I would have gotten the help that I needed early on in the process and avoided all the trouble that I went through.
Yeah. And so what happened? So you decided to check yourself into mental health hospital, and basically, like, how did you get to where you are today? Because you're in a very different place as you talk about and as you share more about your story.
Yeah. So the experience of going into the hospital was very humbling. Before that period, I had a pretty healthy ego because I
Mm-hmm.
didn't understand the voice of ego. It was just a voice. I thought it was who I was.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it was that moment where I had to be 100% vulnerable if I was going to get help. So the doctor sitting across from me, I said, in my mind, I thought, I have nothing to lose. I may spend the rest of my life in here. I'm going to tell him everything that has happened to me, everything that goes on in my head. And when I did that, just the words coming out of my mouth for the first time ever, telling somebody, hey, my head is always telling me to hurt people. And I am not a violent person, so it causes me an insane amount of distress. I'd rather die than hurt another person. And to have, just to say the words, to speak my truth, and then have someone receive it and say, we're going to help you. We can help. You're not going to spend the rest of your life in here. I mean, like, just the whole weight of the world just melted off my shoulders in that moment. And he was right. Within 4 days, I left the hospital, a completely changed human being. And so going forward, so that was when I was 27. I spent my 27th birthday in the hospital. From then on, it's been a mixture of therapy, seeing a psychiatrist. I'm still on medication now. I take a very low dose of medication to help calm the OCD. And then a huge piece of it, because this is almost 20 years now, has been mindfulness. So meditation, presence-based practices, so that when moments do arise, like yesterday, when I was having technical issues, giving a talk to an entire company, and I started to have a panic attack. But now I have the techniques to go, oh, I'm panicking. What do I need in this moment? Even though I'm live in front of a bunch of people, I'm going to take 5 seconds to pause, catch my breath, recenter. It felt terrible, but those, like, if you don't, you need to build up a toolkit in order to navigate through life. So that's what I've tried to do.
Yeah, and so I think this is wonderful what you said, that is that you need to build up a toolkit. It's like any muscle, whether you're strengthening your physical body and you're getting stronger, or you're strengthening your muscle with a new diet or a new habit. There is a toolkit that we must have for our mental health that we have to practice in order to strengthen this, what I call the emotional fitness muscle. So one of the tips in your toolkit is meditation. Do you have any other ones that you can share?
Yeah, so the big thing is sleep. A lot of the people that I'm now a growth and development coach. I work with primarily leaders who are startup founders and CEOs. The number one thing we focus on is what is your wellness routine, and that's how much are you sleeping? What's your diet look like? What kind of substances are you consuming? Because all those inputs will affect your mental well-being, right? So that's one aspect of it. We do dive into a lot of, like, what does mindfulness look like for you? What is introducing a meditation practice or yoga? It's important to do that. Exercise obviously is a huge component of all of this. And then also being vulnerable. Who around you can you talk to about how you're feeling? You do not need to bottle this up. And so having that support system in place, whether it's a partner, best friends, coworkers, that when you are feeling something, like the red, yellow, green exercise, that's a way to introduce vulnerability and express how you're feeling in the workplace. It's a really simple way to do that. So really finding out what is a good mixture for you, what's the right recipe, and then the key thing is sticking to it.
And that's one of the hardest things, right? Is like when we adopt a new habit, is to stick with it for, like, I usually think it takes me about 21 days. Some people maybe 14, but on average about 21 days to start a new habit, is to really enforce it with rewards or sharing with someone every day, like, hey, this is my goal. This is where I got, I was 70%, I was 30%, I was 100%, to have accountability too, and to share it with other people and bring them into your life to say, like, this is a tool I'm trying to practice for my mental health, whether it's meditation or talking more about, male friendships, like finding good friends that you can also practice these tools with, which I think is really important.
Yeah. And Bender, I think the key word you used there was practice. None of this is a perfect. Don't expect perfection. In practices, we try to do our best every day. Some days we might miss the mark, but that's an opportunity to practice self-compassion. And it's just like, okay, this is the thing I committed to. I'm going to come back to it tomorrow. I didn't really do that well today. Or maybe it takes you a week to come back to these practices. And also, practices require a lifetime of effort. Yeah, and that's okay. You'll never perfect it.
Yeah, like perfection doesn't exist. I mean, even
Mm.
Olympians that, train day in and day out for hours. They practice, and they get in the water and they're like, okay, this has actually led me to this time where I'm going to use these tools that I've, like really refined and like have an awesome swim. And I think every time we strengthen our emotional health muscles, it prepares us for the next time and the next time and the next time as we get older and become wiser about how we're feeling.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Okay. Anything else you want to share with our audience?
Yeah, if I could just leave one thing, it's around the idea of practice, and the self-compassion, because self-compassion leads to self-love. And I know it sounds really weird if, somebody says, "Do you love yourself?" As a man, it's almost like, "What are you talking about? Like, what do you mean about love myself?" That, I think, is the ultimate destination for all human beings. Because if you don't love yourself, how can other people love you? And how can you show up as the best version of yourself if you don't practice self-love and self-compassion? So, if mental health is something that's important to you and that you need to investigate, you deserve this. And this is one act of love that you can give yourself, is to start to get healthy.
It's so true. It's so true. Thank you for saying that, because I think oftentimes, like, the stories that I hear and when I have conversations with men about their mental health, they're like, well, I want to love other people more. I want to be a better human for other people, whether that's, my team, my friends, my partner, my family. And oftentimes what I ask is like, but do you love you first? Like, do you take care of you as much as you want to take care of other people? And when we don't have our whole self, we can't bring our whole self to the next person because we don't fully love ourselves, it's quite difficult. And I remember some of my guy friends saying, like, yeah, I've just started honestly in the morning looking at myself, whether it's after a workout or right after I wake up or after I do whatever my morning routine is, and being like, looking at the mirror and being like, bro, I love you. You're fucking great. And I was like, that's so smart, because you're telling yourself how much you care about yourself. And we are thinking beings. Sorry, we are feeling beings that think. We're feeling beings that think. And if we can feel for ourselves, we can start to share that more. And in my hippie way, like, start to share more and more love and start to actually change some things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks, Matt. It's really good to just chat with you again. And I'm really happy that you're able to share your story with more and more people, because I really believe that stories and sharing of stories is how we can actually move the needle of men's mental health.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. All right. So I know that next we are going to talk to 3 different awesome humans that I really love. And we're actually going to start with my good friend, Tate Fletcher. And again, what we're here to talk about is feelings. So what I want to say is that for you as an audience member, what we want you to take away are tips from, like, what Matt was sharing on meditation and loving yourself and being vulnerable, and put those things in your toolbox, because at the end of the event, we want you all to be able to walk away with things that you can use to self-improve, to love yourself more, to be happier and healthier, to live your best versions of yourself. So we're going to bring Tate on. Hi.
What's happening, Bender? How you doing?
It's so good to see you. I mean, we've just been talking on the phone, so seeing your face is just making me smile. This is so
nice.
awesome.
Good to see you too.
Yeah, so you and I have been talking a bit about your mental health over the last few months, and you were recently on a friend's podcast telling more about your story. And I actually want to start with something that touched me, as a conversation you had with your mom when you started to really look at your, like, mental health and journey after you had a brain injury last year. So can you share with us a little bit more about this conversation you had with your mom and why it impacted you so much?
Yeah, I can only guess that you're speaking of, she was telling me to give reference to it, I'd been knocked out for 5 minutes in June of 2019, and it wasn't my first concussion or head injury, but it was the worst as far as post-concussive syndrome and what had happened anyway. After a year of staring at the floor or whatever and drooling and doing what I could to not kill myself, and that was a lot, right? I was doing a lot of hyperbarics. I was doing whatever I could. My mom says, "I'm so glad that you hurt yourself, that you got hurt." And is this what you were talking about?
Yeah, exactly. Because when you shared this, you're like, my mom said, "I'm so glad you got hurt." And you're like, it was actually a really powerful thing she said to me, because I got to look at myself.
Well, and then asking her what do you mean, and in that, she said, "Well, I've seen you arcing, like for the last 8 or 10 years, I've seen you change, right? There's a shift in you." And I go, "What's that shift?" And she says, "Just like less of a lightness and a sweet, like, just there's a darkening." And I could feel that coming before my last injury. And that's the funny thing about head injuries, is they're cumulative and they don't show up as a problem a lot of times until 10 or 20 years later. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like I was experiencing the onset of that a little bit before I'd gotten hurt, and I would have never looked into it, because brain injury doesn't look like an injury. It looks like you're a dick. It looks like your character's got all kinds of flaws. It doesn't look like, and then I mean, I've gotten present to it to speak to that compassion is just like, oh man, I get present to, like, there's a lot of people that are hurt and they have no idea they're hurt, and the echoing effect of this unresolved trauma. If I don't resolve my own trauma, I have no chance of looking at you with any kind of empathy or compassion. Because if it's all off, yeah, it's awful, whatever. My life's bad too. I was growing up. Don't complain. Don't say, we're not talking about this. Don't complain about it. Let's go. Life's hard. Yeah. It was harder for your grandparents. Let's get on the road. Let's move. Let's go. Mm-hmm. And that gets you down the road a little bit, but if you're hurt or something happens to you along the way, what I find is that as gears like need grease and everything to move, it's like I start grinding steel on steel, right? And I'm getting all those kinds of effects that come from that, and there's degrading systems that then happen downstream from that, and I have no idea that they're all related to a multitude of head injuries. Anyway,
no, that's important. So let's actually go back and have you go back in time, so to say, and have you share what happened. What was your injury and what happened after it, like in terms of seeking help and starting to have these conversations with yourself about how you feel and your mental health?
Yeah. I think this being the scope of more than my head trauma, right, is that I think I should preface it all, I guess, with saying, like, as far as mental health, since I was 9 years old, I've been fascinated with the idea of killing myself. And that's never not been present with me. And so, the first time I started seeing a psychiatrist, when I was 10, I went to a psychiatrist, and which was a wild experience. And then, then a bunch of arrests happened. My life was, marked by a lot of colorful experiences, I guess, just due to me trying to figure it out and trying to find where my place was and all that. But I don't know what it was that's so bad that makes me go, I want to check out when I'm 9, Mm-hmm. But I do know that carrying this stuff for a long time, I'd had workarounds and all this idea of you can't love anybody till you love yourself and and all this kind of stuff is like, this is all the talk in the air. And I go, well, then I'm fucked, right? Like all you've done is like telling somebody, oh, you got low self-esteem. Well, man, if you don't give me a solution to that, what good are you? Except like that does me zero good. I need actionable effort. How do I get back on the road? It almost doesn't matter how I got here, because I can't think myself into the right position. I can only move myself into the right position. And so I've got to get into the contrary actions to battle this brain of mine my whole life. Do the thing you don't feel like doing so that you get a long-term better result instead of a quick high fructose corn syrup kind of result, right? And I start learning those things early on because I've got to battle my fucking head my whole life. And so looking for help with that, like for me, I think it's real helpful right now because there's a glossary of terms around it. And it's kind of like when we talk about racism, or we talk about these things that are like subjects that we haven't spoken about in depth with any honesty of looking to really actually acknowledge somebody else, right? And so we don't have a language for that. And right now, the exciting thing is that in a lot of these different arenas, we're just starting to figure out a language for how to get down the road with this stuff, right? I mean, it's in the last few years, it's been real in vogue to go, oh, you're a narcissist or whatever. And I'm like, you didn't even pass the 8th grade. What are we talking about here? We're just calling names to each other that we don't even understand what that means. But as I come to understand it, I look at and I go, yeah, there's these ways that these archetypes we express, right? But I don't know I'm being a narcissist. These are all survival tactics. And it's like, so there's all these blind spots I got to uncover of what made me me to get me here that used to be assets that are now detrimental to my very existence and all my community, right?
Yeah.
And that's been nice. It's nice to know that there's that conversation, that this is happening. There's people like you that there's, you know, I'm in some studies now for brain health and stuff like that. And I've got, you know, a lot of different arcs, but I want to echo, I mean, there's a lot of people that just get old, right? And this idea that you can develop yourself, you know, and that you can develop yourself and it will develop you out of the things that you think are problems today, you know? And so one of these things that I was really grateful for too, for everybody that's come in my life, man, has been a miracle for me from the beginning, right? Good or bad. Everybody's a great example of something, a way to be, a way not to be. But this idea of meditation and owning my mind, right? Because I used to be saddled by anger and things like this. Like we talk about these things, but when I start looking at that, it becomes very real base and gross things like that I can control. My physical don't put hands on somebody else in anger, Tate. Okay, so that's I can start to work around that because now I have a conversation in my head instead of just a reaction. I have a directive, right? And I've got a higher principle I'm trying to look towards. And so those are the slow ways in my life. And then over 20 years of that, right? Now I look at it and it's like that anger thing isn't an anger. It's an understanding. From the position that you're in, I can see that you would behave that way. And I've behaved that way myself at times. And you're not everything that you are in this moment. Your whole life is a movie. And it's not this snapshot that I'm seeing, you know? And in that, there's no name calling. There's an understanding that you are me and I am you, right? And that we're together. And in this universal kind of alliance of souls that we maybe all kind of can aggregate towards and become a whole. Maybe that's what God is. I don't know. But there's something in the communication that I'm able to have with others now that is, it's just, you know, I mean, this life school, right? It's just, there's a lot of different classes
Life
here.
school.
Anyway, I talked enough. Thanks.
No. I love that. I love life school. We need to do like a whole other thing on life school. But yeah, you had this gnarly brain injury and then you started to get help. And you found some help at this like awesome brain institute in Newport Beach. And then you really started to like have honest conversations with people when they would be like, how are you feeling, Tate? I remember you and I would talk about this. And it's like, yeah, how am I feeling? Be super honest and really vulnerable that like today's a shitty day or today's a rough day or today's a great day. And people were like, wow, Tate's like really honestly sharing his feelings. Like this is pretty cool. And now you're in the process of saying like, yeah, this life school thing, this whole thing I was told before, you know, like these masks that I wear, these defenses that I have, like actually aren't helping me in life school today. Right. Because I want to be a more loving person.
Well, I mean, yeah, you know, I think all of it is getting myself out of the way, right? Mm-hmm. It's like if I can get out of the way of my, like, I mean, people call it ego or whatever, but if I can get my higher self of looking for your interests, all my interests gets met. You know, if I can be helpful to others around me, I don't have a lack, right? And if I do think I have a lack, there's nothing that can fill it. It does, you know. Conversely, it's like I always say to guys that I work with, I'm like, I hope you get all the women, all the cars, the job, whatever the thing is that you think you need. I hope you get it quick. I hope you get it all right now, like an avalanche. So you can see that that's not what you're lacking, right? That's not the missing piece. And we chase all the shit, right? We chase our tail a lot as, you know, I don't even like saying as man, all this stuff as man, as this man. This is my experience. Tate Fletcher. I know a lot of people can relate to it. I relate to a lot of y'all, but I don't want to at anybody, you know, and I don't want to speak for all men or all brain injuries. They're all different, man. And I tried a lot of different things. And that's all I can do is say, stay in the try. One of the most grateful things I'm grateful for today is that, you know, that reductive quality of like, oh, when you and Terrence saw me on the beach and like, how are you? It's like, I'm just able to get in the sunlight again, because otherwise it would be horrible. The sunlight was assaultive to me for over a year. And so like this reductive quality though of it, everything goes away and you're just left with your breath for a couple of years. That's all right. You know, in this life school, you know, that, you know, there's all these different courses that we can sign up for. It's all up to you. You know, when do you want to get through this course? Get into that, like, and it's like whatever we want to do. And I didn't know that. I thought I had to have the right answer all the time. So I had other things that weren't just brain injuries, just bad ideas, right? And so this idea of being able to, you know, get with somebody or people and have a process where you can really bury yourself, I guess, and allow for an acceptance and a responsibility for your whole life. There's a real other side to that I thought that I knew what that was, that I didn't have any idea of the depth of that thing, right? And when I was a man of 25 years old, I thought I'm 16, I read Marcus Aurelius, and I'm like, boy's got some ideas. I get it. I relate. I feel that. Universal truths, man. I get it. When I'm 25, that's a different book. When I've lived the road until I'm 40, I go, I just smile anymore. You know, I mean, it's like I'm a lot at my folly about the ways but I just didn't know what I didn't know. You know, and I didn't even know that there were other things that I didn't know that I didn't know. You know what I mean? I had no idea the depth of my ignorance even, you know? Yeah. And so anyway, I've been, the gratitude is that I've got any ability or desire at all to be able to be curious or to be in life. Because, you know, up until I you know, got some healing, there was no way I was going to make it till my last birthday, you know, and I'm completely reorganized. And so that's the thing is that, you know, people need to know that they're, you know, if I'm to say anything at anybody, it's that you're not alone and that there are solutions.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like 2 men in a row saying that. You're echoing what Matt's saying about you're not alone.
I mean, there's no victim that can recover, you know, so there's no other answer except that there are paths. You know, if you say there's not, then you're right. There's no help for you, but no victim can recover. So I got to go, where can I look towards the asset? Even if I don't believe, because when I'm hopeless, when I'm ready to put a pistol in my mouth, it doesn't matter. Yeah. If you tell me to rub my belly, stand on my head naked in the middle of the plaza, if I'm empty and I'm hurt, I'll do that. Whatever answer you got. Thank God the answer is not that extreme. You know what I mean? But but it's there. Yeah.
And I think something you said that's important. That's one of the tips for you. Actually, 2 things is meditating and breathing. I know that's really important to you. The other is being accountable to yourself. Like when Terrence and I saw you at the beach, I saw you multiple times in a row. It was very like synergistic. I would see you at the beach around the same time.
Really, like, yeah. That's some God
This is stuff. For my mental health too. Like I come here to look at the waves, the ocean's in my blood. I was born in Hawaii, you know, and you were like, yeah, I get out here more days than not, even if I'm a little tired, even if the sunlight's too bright, because I know it's good for my health and wellness, like my mental health and wellness. And I was like, yeah, you're on a journey. This is so cool. You're being accountable to yourself. You're loving yourself, like we were talking about earlier.
And it's like even in that meeting, you know, of going, because even to be here, it's not like it's huge, but for me to schedule is not easy. Still, right? And there's stuff I'm just coming into that's like that. So even when I see you and Terrence that day, out of context and everything, and all the crazy, I mean, it's been a crazy world since we'd seen each other before. And just the distortion of being out of place and everything. And I was like, the confusion that just that those pieces of information. And so like, and then going, I don't feel ashamed of that. That's okay. My mind didn't, it's what it was, man. You know, and honestly, I can go forward with that without that shit and put a smile in my hand out. I mean, there's people that I've re-met this year that I know, that I've had meals with, that I didn't know anymore, you know, but there's a relearning that can happen, you know. I mean, fuck, I've gotten my balance. I've learned to move again. Like, you know, there's a lot of asset, man. There's a lot of good I could breathe into it, man, to let you know. And if anybody wants to know more, please reach out. And I'm going to try to be in this discussion as much as I can. Because I know how that feels.
Tate, I love you, wonderful human. I'm
Love
so
you.
happy you're doing this with me and being honest and vulnerable about your journey. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for putting this together. It's super important.
You're welcome. Talk to you soon. Love you.
Yeah.
All right. So the next awesome human we're going to talk to is Josh Hunt. So Josh and I met last year for a connection. And he and I have just been going on this journey as entrepreneurs together. And we've been talking about men's mental health, running businesses together, which has been awesome. And I want to ask you today about like, how can sharing emotions enhance relationships? You have your own mental health journey as well as with your brother. So share a little bit about your own experience and then how you relate in sharing emotions with your family.
Yeah, so well, first off, thanks for having me. It's such a pleasure. And as our last sentence just said, this is a very much needed thing. Coming from where I come from, this isn't talked about in the hood. Being an African American, it's least likely talked about where I'm from, and no one really likes to talk about their feelings. So when I saw an opportunity to do so, I said, sign me up. I want to be an example and a light to those, on doing this and walking this path. So to answer your question, what's one way to do that? It starts with authenticity for me. When you're authentic, it really leads to a vulnerable side where people are able to connect with you. So when you're able to connect, that's when you're able to really express yourselves. And once you get to that place where you are vulnerable, you are authentic, that other person gravitates towards you and sees and experiences what you're experiencing, essentially, because you're speaking in that a relatable tone to them. Because I believe the universe's language is truth, and when you are speaking your authentic truth, no one cannot listen to you. And that's something that I want to stress to people is your story is great enough. And a lot of people today, as it relates to just mental health, feels like they have to live out someone else's story. From people that are like sought out leaders or pastors or great influencers. What people fail to realize is that like your authentic story is enough, and that's what people are going to lean into. So in order to really increase engagement for that matter, or just your mental health, it really starts with being authentic to others. And as our first panelist said, being authentic with yourself, being real with yourself first, and that's having a sense of awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So how do you, tell me a little bit more, because I know a lot of this story, but tell other dudes a little more about your experience on your own mental health journey over the years.
Sweet. Well, dudes, it has been crazy, as you guys would all know. For me, like I said, I'm a young kid, low income background, grew up 4 brothers, 1 sister. We stayed in a small apartment, all in 1 room. And for that right there, just saying that over, it just sounds so mind and nerve wracking. Where I was constantly, fighting for attention, as well as just like a sense of belonging within my own, my own space. And social economic class that I was in. And, growing up wasn't easy. It was definitely hard. And something that, Black men don't really talk about as much. And I definitely want to be that voice and that soundboard, is that it is hard for us. I mean, it's definitely hard for men, but it's definitely hard for Black men to express their feelings, just based on, research, based on research, based on my own personal experience. I will sit here and tell you that as a Black man, it is definitely hard to express yourself. And that's just, I didn't see it growing up. I didn't have anyone around me to really show me how to express, my true self and share my story. My story is good enough, and who I am is enough. And that, that translated in my behavior, and I also saw it in my brother's behavior. Going to, fast forward, high school, I went to Wake Forest. Out of college, I was an athlete there, a college student athlete. And I chose to go to Wake Forest because of the business school, and it was an elite business school at the time. It was the #1 business school. And as a Black African athlete, that's not somewhere you would typically choose to go play. So right then and there, it just kind of shows you that I'm a little different. I didn't really have, like I said, that connection, sense of belonging, and then I get, teleported into New York at Wake Forest, essentially, where teleported is what it feels like. You're a transplant, and I'm completely, by myself. I feel like, I mean, the only Black people that are at this particular school are athletes. Like they're very few that are actually there or accepted for academics. So this, really weighed heavy on my mental, because I was, really kept in a box and was told to really focus on sports. I wasn't taken serious in any of my business classes. I would be picked on to get answered. I just really didn't have a voice there. And that really affected my mental health, and that affected then my performance. So I'm going to tie this all up here in a second. So leaving this school and actually going to Texas Tech, where my younger brother went, I got to really see the same thing happen to him. And he kind of went down this journey of like, is life real? What's really going on? And he graduated his high school, valedictorian. So he's a very, very smart kid. Going to Texas Tech, was in that top 10, top 15 percentile. And, he was really battling with this. Like, he was battling with this identity, self-identity, not really being sure of himself. Was he gay? Was he not? Was he a girl? Was he a man? Like, man, it was really hard on him, and he wasn't able to really express himself just growing up in the household that we had, as well as the school that he went to. So I kind of could relate to him, because I understood he didn't really have a sense of belonging. He really, just didn't really have anywhere he could express himself authentically to our family, or to the people where, he was going to school at. And he actually left school and went to study abroad in Germany, where he actually got into he graduated from Tech while he was over there and decided to stay. And he got into, some of the wrong things, just to really get that connection. And he found some guys and little, inappropriate cliques that, persuade him, and he chose to take different drugs. And this actually affected his mental health even more so. And he went into like a psychosis, and he really thought that, the world really evolved around him. He really didn't have a sense or a pulse on himself at all. And he was really just, suffering daily from this, to the point where he was actually arrested in Germany and held for quite some time because of mental health.
Yeah.
What I do respect about Germany's system in relation to ours is that they actually did give him the meds that he needed to recover, and they actually helped him detox before we were able to actually meet him at the embassy and actually take him back to America.
Mm-hmm.
So just hearing his story, once he got back, he was at a sane place, where he was actually at a place where he could understand what we were saying, and we could understand what he was saying. So we tried to check him into a facility. And, if you guys don't really know, you can check yourself out as an adult, unless you get a, mandate or court order where he has to stay in there. This was before we knew that. So we would check him in, and he would just simply check himself back out, go get high on the same drugs that he was on, and he really just struggled with who he was. He went to Facebook about his family, just said a lot of just things that were not true about every one of us that were growing up with him, that were just completely wrong. Not to get too TMI, but he was just like, I was raped, I was this, I was that, and it was just like a lot of things that just weren't true. And we knew that his mental capability or understanding of awareness of what's actually happening in reality was a disconnect there. It was a disconnect. So having said all of that, while going through that and my own personal journey as an entrepreneur, where I had a successful recruiting business for some time, stopped that and did a shift, a quick pivot into more of like a cultural entertainment space where I lost a lot of money and I ended up becoming homeless. So while having this going on, I had my own personal battles going on where I wasn't able to really sit there and only focus on just myself at the time. But the first speaker's point is that's what you really have to do. You have to literally cut everything else off. Even though he's my brother, my family, I got this burning out, this burning. I had to literally sit. I think about that meme. I don't know if you heard that GIF where you have that little character. He's sitting in a place reading a flyer, and everything else is burning behind him. That's what you need to do. And in doing so, while being homeless, I had a membership to Lifetime the gym. And so it's so funny that people thought I was actually living luxurious when I was just I would show like on my social media like, hey, I'm at Lifetime, da, 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 and like it was really in reality I was actually there because I didn't have a place to go, and that was like where I showered. That's where I actually discovered something that really changed my life and my really I got a grasp on my mental health, which was yoga. So in doing all of this, like I said, all these fires going on around me, I signed up for these yoga classes and saw a tremendous difference in my own awareness to where I'm like, all right, all these fires are going on around me. How do I center myself and get myself to a place where I can actually be of help? Because if you're running around and you're on fire, you're not going to save the person else on fire because you're on fire. So if you're able to really take a step back and nurture yourself and feed yourself and fill yourself up, then you're able to then pour into others. And that's exactly what I did. For that 6-month period, I did yoga and meditation. Yeah, Life School. That's crazy. You said that. I actually went to a school named Life School. There's a school called Life School, and I was like, wow, I never thought about it like that. But yeah, so going through my life school phase for that 6 or 7 months or so, I was able to really learn more. I was attracting the right people. I was in the flow, if you will. So you get into the flow by really taking care of yourself, then you're then able to take care of others. So that's why I really support Kilo. I support the vision and everything that you stand for, because it's mental health and men's health is top tier and top notch, to the fact that to the point to where it's like we need to honor that and understand that it is as important as anything else in your life. Yeah. So
yeah, man. It's so good. It's so good to hear you talk about like your journey and how it basically the foundation that you built for yourself, to realize that if you don't take care of yourself first, you can't help your brother. You can't even be there for him if you don't love yourself first, but also like create good boundaries, right? Like, hey, if I'm not taking care of my mental health, how can I actually help a family member as well is really important.
Right. Exactly. So I couldn't.
You want to share about tips?
Yeah, I was gonna say just end on a good note for those who are wondering. My brother Caleb, he is doing well, doing a lot better now. He's living in LA in a studio apartment where we're constantly checking on him. I just actually flew back about a week and a half ago from visiting him. So yeah, love to see him doing well. Constantly, checking on him. And the tips that I have is, some of the tips that I give him is just, understanding your why. Being able to understand your why, that really takes a lot of pressure off of you trying to really compete with others, because that's where I feel like a lot of mental health kind of like stems from. It's just like, I'm not, if you just had tunnel vision and you only saw like your path and not really, manipulated by all of the social medias and other people around you, you would then be able to have that clear sight of, okay, this is my vision, this is my why and my purpose. Focusing on that, I believe, is what really, channels that inner you and really gives you that foundation to really walk the path that you're supposed to walk. And once you're in that path that you feel like you're supposed to walk, you're going to be happy. You're going to wake up more excited than you've ever woke up before. You're going to wake up knowing that this person's purpose that you have is bigger than yourself. And that really just takes all of that and alleviates all that pressure that you used to having. You're just like, okay, this is me, this is who I am, and I'm walking in that, and like can't no one else tell me anything different. And it's a really good feeling to have, to know that you're in your purpose. So I would say focus on your why, walk in your purpose, and I think that's a great place to start when it comes to mental health, outside of some of the other things that the gentlemen have said, yoga to working out and being physically fit and things like that. I think something that's non-tangible, but something that to wrap your mind around and to really think about, I think, is to find your why and your purpose.
Yeah, like it's such good tips. So find your why, think about your purpose, make sure you're taking care of yourself first, make sure that you're breathing, that you're being accountable to yourself, and you're being vulnerable. Like the tips are stacking up. So I'm so excited that you all are sharing these with everyone. And Josh, we're going to talk soon and we're going to keep this conversation going. And thank you for being just willing to do this first event with me, and to talk openly about your mental health journey, because I'm not looking to talk to experts. I'm looking to talk to real people, about real men, about their feelings, which is what we're doing today. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
See you, Josh. All right, last but not least, we actually have gone over time because of technical difficulties. So we are in OT for Kilo, but last but not least, we're gonna talk to my very good friend, Terrence Davey. So we bring Terrence on.
Hey, Bender.
Hi, T, how are you?
Fantastic.
Oh, I miss
I'm
you
going to
so
pause
much.
real quick. I already started off with a little bit of a lie because
Okay.
yeah, when you started, you were talking to Matt and you asked red, yellow, green. I was like, what am I feeling right now? And I actually wrote down yellow but green presenting. I have this tendency because I'm really high energy, and I can convince myself to be happy or put out excitement at any time, to just have that be my first response. I'm actually exhausted today. I've had a very long work week. I got my second dose of the Pfizer vaccine yesterday. I feel like I got hit by a truck, but I can present green. So.
What's so powerful about this and what's so cool that you shared this is like you're checking in with yourself in the present moment and not just thinking you know who you're going to be in the next moment, which I think is a very powerful thing. It also goes back to what Tate was saying about breathing and becoming present. And you and I talk a lot about that.
Mm-hmm.
It was cool actually to hear Josh earlier talk about his experience as a Black man in America with mental health, because I know that's something that's important to you as well. So I just want to start by saying, what challenges did you face when you realized you were feeling depressed a few years ago and you started to really think shit, I got to do something about this. I'm interested in evolving as a human, and being a better man.
Yeah. I'll start with just the baseline challenge. It was understanding, experience, and access to even the ideas or language around mental health. I'll probably get into sharing a little bit about my past or my childhood, but I want to preface it with pretty much any kind of insight that I have about my childhood came from discovery in my mid 20s. I say this a lot and people laugh when I say it, but I'm like 100% not kidding at all. I don't think I had a truly conscious thought until I was probably 24 years old. I was just fully driven by my subconscious desires and probably mostly by emotion. Matt said something that really stuck out to me, like you're allowed to express anger or excitement as a man. And I think I just bounced back between those two, at least in my external appearance. But internally, I was getting eaten up by all of the small microtransgressions and the larger social commentary about what my potential was, how I was expected to perform, like what ceilings were placed over my head, being a Black man in the United States of America. And I just wasn't conscious of it. So I experienced it in my childhood as a lot of anger. I was very, very angry, hurt kid. And then over time also became a very angry, hurt, large kid, which is not a very safe place to be. I think I've become a person who literally won't hurt a fly. Literally, like I capture flies and let them out of my house, or let them live out the rest of their days once they get in here. But yeah, that was like that baseline struggle, building up the vocabulary or even understanding, which is an ongoing struggle to this day. Like during this call, actually, I believe it was when Tate was speaking, I realized that what got me started on this journey, first of all, was meditation. I was using the Headspace app while I was just miserable in an unhealthy relationship and a job that I absolutely hated and felt completely unfulfilled in. I somehow encountered the Headspace app and started meditating. And it gave me a little bit of space between my thoughts and my feelings to insert some level of insight, which made me realize like a lot of the unhealthy things in my life had come from my own behavior, my own misunderstanding of myself and my own judgments, including and especially the relationship that I was in. And while Tate was talking, I just identified for the first time, like, oh, I was feeling a lot of guilt once I figured out what was going on. I was feeling guilt and shame, which are relatively new emotions for me to identify with, though I've clearly felt them a lot. Yeah, I don't recall what your original question was, so I'm just going off on a limb. If you want to interject, go for it, or I'll just continue.
This is men talking feelings. This is what I love. Perfect. This is like the real shit.
Cool. I thought that's what you'd say.
Yeah, you know me too well. What I want to hear, and I think what's interesting about conversations you've had in the past is, just like you shared in this moment, you've had a lot of like aha moments about how you feel, and you're trying to understand what this feeling in your body means and to be able to articulate it. And when you realized you were depressed and really sad a few years ago, without the education you're saying you had to, like, where do you go? How do I describe feelings? Like, what did you recognize in yourself that led you to take yourself to therapy? Because that's usually a pretty big jump, right? There's usually like things that happened before and you'd been thinking about it and talking about it with friends, but how did you actually go on that journey and decide to do that for yourself?
Yeah, I actually started with self-therapy. So now I remember where I was going with that story. So after all of the meditation, I did end up ending the relationship with my ex. We were together for 7.5 years, from the time I was 18 until 25. So super formative years in your life. And while I at least had the knowledge to remove myself or end a situation that was somewhat spiraling, I had no clue what to do with all of the sadness and guilt and shame that I was feeling after. And so I just kind of followed my internal desires. which led me to a lot of dating and a lot of drinking and partying and just grinding myself to the bone. And that just wasn't working. I was getting less and less happy by the day. During that period, I was lucky enough to meet my now fiance, Olivia, who's a wonderful person. Who helped me find some insight and realize that I needed some form of help, but that still wasn't therapy for me. I actually was drawn to psychedelics, and so I had hit a wall. I was like, I have to do something about this, or I'm not going to make it through the end of this year. Like I had ideated about suicide quite a bit before that already, and all I really needed was the trigger to push me over the edge.
Yeah.
And so I actually went to Peru and sat with ayahuasca through 4 separate ceremonies over a couple-week period. And I never recommend that people go and explore with psychedelics. I think that's something you need to determine on your own. And then I think it's irresponsible to just go and say that people should do it. But the impact that it had on me was, I got through years of work in a couple of ceremonies of sitting with that guilt and forgiving myself and learning compassion. And then when I came back is when the more conscious work actually started. I eventually found a therapist, again, with the help of my fiance, who's a therapist herself, which was difficult. It's difficult to find a therapist, especially.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit. Like, it is difficult.
It's fucking hard.
I think it's important for people to understand that finding a therapist is not easy. You don't just go into the store and you say, I want to pick that one, and you keep it for a lifetime. Yeah. You have to go through a process. What was that like for you?
Again, this comes back to the lack of knowledge or access. The therapy was not a conversation in my home growing up. I didn't know people that went to therapy. What I did hear about from like shows that I consume, which I've gone back and rewatched as an adult, that actually talk about therapy in a really negative way, because Black America's history with therapy, like, it's been used as a tool to control and separate families. And so we're naturally going to have a negative feeling about it and a repulsion to it, and parents are going to protect their children from it as well. So I had no clue how to find a therapist. My fiance, again, she helped me out a ton. She gave me a list of folks that I could try to reach out to. And honestly, my first therapist that I had, I did not have a good connection with him and did not have a good experience. And it kind of turned me off of therapy for a while. And so I think I did like 5 or 6 sessions, and it was like, I'm not getting anything out of this. I don't feel like this person understands me or has the tools to actually address what I'm struggling with through. And so I stopped going to therapy again, and still didn't have the tools to actually deal with what I was feeling. But I had carried forward that feeling of responsibility and accountability for my actions, starting with the ayahuasca ceremony. I realized that if I wanted to continue to achieve a healthy relationship with my fiance, and also wanted to present myself as the leader that I am in the workspace and in my friend group as well, I have to find some way to do work with myself. And so went back to the drawing board. My fiance helped me again with, she gave me a lot of references. But at that point, I at least knew kind of what I was looking for. And also being a sales leader, I just hit the phones. I called like every therapist on the list and took them all through the same process. I asked the same questions to everybody and like did a rating system for them.
I didn't know you did that. That's a great idea. Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to help people with that as well. It's kind of a weird way to approach it, I guess, but I found a therapist and I've been seeing her for 15 months now. And it's just a constant exercise of deeper learning and understanding about myself, which allows me to be more compassionate about myself and love myself more, and then express that love to others.
Yeah, and the tips that you're sharing are like, do the work to be curious, right? Like on our time today, you're like, wait, I just checked in my color. It was green. when I'm this way, but yellow now. Like there's a difference here. I'm really gonna like check myself on this and be authentic to myself and accountable to myself to say like, is this really what I'm feeling? Is it a mask? Like what am I doing here? And I think that's one really helpful tip, is to like check in with yourself constantly and be like, yo, how am I feeling? Where's my ego at? Where's my love at? Where am I centered? Are there other things that you do to check in with yourself and to make sure that you're being authentic and that you're being honest about how you're feeling?
Yeah, I think the checking in with myself that's a pretty consistent process, and it's about as simple as it sounds. What's difficult is getting to a place where you can gain enough space from your thoughts or emotions to do that check-in. And that's why I felt like I didn't have a conscious thought until my mid-20s. And that's why I would say meditation helped me, and I know it helps a lot of people, and people mentioned yoga as well. Just anything that allows you to gain a little bit of space. But then something that's been more valuable for me, I tend towards needing things to be really practical for me to understand them and adopt them. And once I can turn them into something practical, I can apply it pretty effectively. I kept hearing the term self-love and self-compassion, and I had no idea what that meant. So like, if you're talking about someone who doesn't even have any kind of like lexicon of mental health terms or even an understanding of guilt or shame, like the concept of self-love and self-compassion, it was too much for me. Like people were just saying, do it. And I'm like, I don't know what it is. How do I do it? That doesn't make any sense. How am I supposed to do something? And what I realized was you have to, maybe you don't have to, but I chose to define it myself. And that allowed me to be more practical. And I guess what I'm getting at is like the journey to mental health and compassion is very, very personal. And reflecting on what it means to you and defining those words for yourself. For me, self-love is a non-judgmental connection to yourself. The ability to look at your thoughts and your decisions, and though you might not agree with some of the things that you do, and bringing forth the understanding that you're inherently imperfect, and that's okay.
And that's okay and normal, which is great. I mean, I hope people, watching now and rewatching this will realize like just having this conversation helps us move forward, because it's saying like, again, like we don't have doctors on the panel right now talking about the definition of mental health. We have people like yourself and Matt and Tate and Josh talking about their own experiences. And you're all sharing similar things, like check in with yourself, love yourself, be compassionate. And the more that we say that these things are important and that they can become easy, I think we start to remove the stigma of like, mental health is hard for men. Vulnerability is scary, because we start to pad these ideas with negative words, and we tell ourselves these things, and we know our words are very powerful. Having these types of conversations and you just saying like, yeah, you could do it. I mean, I didn't know, and I went on this journey with myself. Took myself even all the way to Peru at one point to better understand myself. Like, just got to do it. It's not actually that scary. And don't let, the narrative tell you that you're weak if you want to like understand your mental health or talk about emotions.
Yeah. I'll say one more thing that's related or on that spectrum. This is just my personal belief, so take it or leave it. But I actually think that that's our purpose here, is to understand ourselves and gain that insight. Purpose here being in life. We have wholly unique expressions of the human condition residing within us. And if you don't do the work to understand what makes you unique and what makes you special, there's no one that's going to do that work when you're gone. We just missed an opportunity to really understand something beautiful. So.
I filled my heart with so much love, Terrence. Thank you so much. I really miss you. I miss seeing every one of you all. I'm so grateful that you came to this event to chat with not only me, but to hear each other's stories and then to hear your stories. Before you go away, Terrence, just stay on for a minute more. So we've heard a lot of great tips. Oh, we'll see everybody now, which is so cool. We've, I think, heard a lot of great tips. I'm not just saying that, from Matt and Tate and Terrence and Josh. And we're going to have another event on May 8th. And we want you all, yes, you, the audience members, to take these tips and put them into action over the next 3 weeks. This is May, the month that we are in, if you didn't know, is Mental Health Awareness Month. That's one of many reasons we're doing this event today on May 7th. And so we're going to have a follow-up event on May 8th where we want, again, you, the audience, to take these tips. Take one of them, 2, 3, maybe you came up with your own idea from listening from these awesome humans about their own mental health story. Put it into action, and then we want to invite you to come onto a panel with me and Adam to share your stories. So actually, you all in the audience talking about feelings. So we have a link to stay up to date on the information for the follow-up event that Adam will share. We also have a community on Discord where if you feel like you want to continue the conversation there, you can do that as well. And that's all from me. I'm very excited to continue these events. This is our first time. Thank you for being early adopters, Matt and Tate, Adam, Terrence, and Josh. And for me, this is a learning experience. I'm just really excited to support men's mental health, and I love each and every one of you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Bender. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.
Everyone, have a great
Thanks,
day.
Tate, Terrence.
Bye.